Hi, and thank you for your interest in the deliverable that you would receive from Secure Ideas if you have penetration tests done by us. Now, of course, I want to point out that we try to follow the industry standard for deliverables, so you should expect similar, if not the same type of deliverable from any other security consulting firm that you're working with. So let's talk about what is the deliverable. Now, we've said many times over the years on stage, in talks, in training, and even to our clients, that the deliverable is probably the most critical piece of a penetration test. While it's really cool to talk about the hacks we've done and the exploits that have happened, the deliverable is really the only long-term part of the project. So we may do a penetration test of your organization over a 2-week period, and that report is going to last for years. As a matter of fact, in many cases, we find that organizations refer back to that same report multiple years later as they're moving to a more secure state. So it is very important to ensure that the deliverable has what you need. Now, here at Secure Ideas, what we do is we've split the report up into 5 pieces, with one of those pieces being optional. The start is the executive summary. The executive summary is, it's basically a small portion of the report designed for a non-technical audience, right? We call it the executives, but we know that many organizations have technical executives. But the goal of the executive summary is just to summarize the entire report and say, hey, out of everything that we're giving you, these are the things we want to make sure that you don't miss. Right? After the executive summary, we include a narrative. And the narrative is exactly that, the story of the test. We talk about the things that we tried, the things that your tested system prevented, the things that you did well at. We'll talk about things like, while we were testing this, an alert was generated, and this is the response that the organization followed, and whether that was good or bad. We also talk about the things that we found, and we describe how we found them and how they impacted our testing. Then we go into probably the most significant, or at least the largest portion of the deliverable, and that is the findings and recommendations section. The findings and recommendation settings is exactly that. It's a description of everything that we found that we consider a problem. Each of the findings and recommendations, and they're one thing, right, has a summary of what the finding means, right? It's going to describe what cross-site scripting is, as an example. Then we have the findings section, where it actually talks about the findings as they pertain to your specific test. How did we find it in your app? How did we find it on your network? What does it mean to you? Why is it bad? Why did we rank it as a high-risk item or as a low-risk item? We also give you information on how you can replicate the finding, so that you don't need to call us again just to test that one finding, even though we include a retest in our jobs, right? Then finally, we have the recommendation as part of the finding, and this is a solution or remediation. Sometimes it'll include multiple options with an explanation of why this option is better, but may cause you problems, and so you might want to look at a less effective option that doesn't have those side effects, right? Then we have the strategic guidance section. And a lot of people think, wow, but Kevin, that is very similar to the findings and recommendations. You know what? It is. The difference is that what we're trying to provide is some guidance on things that you should be looking at next. Things that maybe don't raise to the level of an actual finding, like, oh man, that's bad. But something that it's like, you know what? In 6 months, a year, 2 years, you probably should be looking at this. We also will talk about things that maybe are overarching. So we found this finding, and this finding. And the fact that you have all 3 of those findings tell us that strategically you're not doing this thing, right? And so it's not a finding by itself, but it's something that we want you to think about. And then finally, the part that I said was optional, and that is the appendixes or appendici, or however you pluralize that word, right? And this is sometimes when we're doing something, we'll have a finding, and this is very common on network pen tests, less common on application and API pen tests, right? If I'm testing your organization and I find that you're missing this patch across 1,000 systems, well, I'm not going to list 1,000 systems in the findings section, because it makes it very hard for you to find the meat of what you need to know in the test. So what we'll do is we'll give some samples in the finding, and then we'll refer to Appendix A, right? Other times we'll list things that were discovered or found, like an example from a recent test that I was involved in. During the testing, the organization was tracking and monitoring and alerting, and part of what we wanted to test was how well they did that. And so in the appendix, we had a list of the alerts that they had talked to us about, the alerts that related to what we were doing, so that they could refer back to them as they were working with, in this case, their MSSP. Okay? So those are the parts of the report. We also have letters of attestations and the process for a pen test that you may want to follow up after you read this article. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you on the project.